Rambam says that although a wife is permitted to a husband continuously, but he should not, the words, it's really quoting the words of the Gemara, Talmud, do not find yourself with your wife like a rooster finds himself by the hen. Everything is with moderation. Then he says that even words of intimacy between the two people, they should be appropriate. It shouldn't be vulgarities, because if you say a thing which is inappropriate, on the day of reckoning, those recordings are going to be played back to the person, and he's going to be held accountable for that. Now he says, what about if they're drunk? Two people, they have relations when they're in a state of intoxication. It's a problem. We're talking about a Jew. Now, when does the soul go into a child? Although life is after 40 days of conception, Talmud says at the time of the act, the soul already has relevance to that act. So we're talking about at that moment, something is happening based on the state of mind and the setting that will determine the purity of that soul. So if a person is in a drunken state, she and he, even though it's a physical act, but that physical act has such extensive special ramifications that will actually impede it and not allow it to manifest itself as it's supposed to. You know, might as well do it. That's the attitude. Person's in a melancholy state, depressed. What about if the woman is sleeping and the husband wants to do the act of procreation when she's not awake? This is based on the Gemara. Lo yenos oso. Bena wrote, so what if a person forces himself upon his wife? His wife's not interested, and he literally, it's what do you want to call it? Legal rape? I don't know what you want to call it. He forces himself on his wife. Ella berotz and shneim. They both consent, fully consent. Ubesimchosam, usmeichem, and they're happy. There's a joyous feeling, positive to one another. He says, Yitzchak mat imo kidei tushyashiv daito. He's permitted to speak in light matter just to make her comfortable. This is the intimate talk before one engages, to put the woman in that comfortable state, in a positive state. V'yivo bebusha v'lo ba'azus v'yifrosh miyad. A person, when you cohabit, it should be with a humility and not with an arrogance. You have a right. Like, you're a dominant figure. You're taking over your wife. You're capturing. It's like you're a victor. That arrogance is not a good thing to have at this moment. It's not good to have any time. But to display it with this, that's, the macho. At the time of that, it's the wrong thing. It's inappropriate. A person who conducts himself appropriately with refinement during the act of cohabitation. Lo dai lo shekidish nafsho. It's not only did he sanctify his soul, despite the earthiness and of the act, you were able to somehow rise above it and put it into a spiritual context. V'tir atzmo, and he purified himself. V'tikin Deios, and he has a proper mindset, not like an animalistic act. Because he did it with such refinement and humility and quality, the children that could be born are going to be pleasant, meaning pleasant tempered, ubaishonim. They can have humility. They can have conscience. Ru'uyin l'chochma u'lechasidus. They will have a capacity to be wise, and be talmidei chachamim and chasidus, and even to appreciate things which are not obligatory, to advance in the spiritual realm, because they are a product of something which is not totally earthy. Cohabitation is an earthy act, but the question is, where do you stand in that earthy act? I'll give you an example. Person eats like a glutton. That's a mundane, animalistic way of eating. If you eat maybe the same volume of food, but you eat it the way you eat it, the way you chew it, the way you swallow it, and the mindset, why you're eating it, will determine whether it's an animalistic act or it's to maintain yourself as a healthy human being. One who behaves and conducts it like the people, like the masses, who walk in the dark. The type of children you're going to have are going to be like the masses. What do the masses understand? What do you mean? This guy's an earthy guy. His son went to Harvard, right? And he's making six figures and he's only 19 years old. But that's not what it's all about. Modesty is a very positive trait, to be modest. A person's humble is also its modesty. A person's exceptionally brilliant. He doesn't share his accomplishments with the masses. Whose business is it? Well, I want them to appreciate who I am. Why is it important they should appreciate who you are? So it's really contrary to humility. What about if you have to share who you are, because you have something to offer? Unless you reveal who you are, they're not going to be able to be beneficiaries of what you have to offer. And of course you should reveal. Because now you can be a contribution to society. But just to go and tell people who you are because you should know who I am, that's contrary to, that's not modesty. You're not a modest person. People are Torah sages. They behave within a context of great degrees of modesty. What does that mean? Lo yizbazu v'lo yiskalu rosham. They will not put themselves in a disgraceful state, and therefore they always go with their heads covered. V'lo gufam. And they don't go with exposed bodies. Even when he goes to do his bodily functions, even there he should be modest. He should not expose himself until he sits down. Is it part of the way he dresses? They will not go in a disgraceful state. They will not uncover their heads, and not their bodies. Even when he goes to do his bodily functions, he'll behave with modesty. He will not remove his garments until he sits down. This is important. After a person does these bodily functions, the Gemara talks about this, he will not clean himself with his right hand. What's the reason? Could you imagine, the president, when he signs a bill into a bill, he has about 600 pens, and he checks a box, he gives them out. And these pens are related to what that legislation he signed on. So the pen has special value. if the person says takes that pen and he writes supposedly something inappropriate, to a degree, it's like a disgrace for the one who gave you the pen. If it reflects badly on, it doesn't represent the person who gave you that pen. I'll give you an example. A rabbi gives you a notebook, Tiffany quality paper, to write you Torah Navalei. And you say, you know something, I'm going to use that notebook to write nonsense and foolishness. Not appropriate. That book was given to you, that notebook, to record something of great value. And you're going to go put some kind of scribbling on there, which is less than that, which is worthless. Okay? It's not acceptable. The right hand, what do we do with our right hand? If a person puts on tefillin, which hand do you put on tefillin? You wear tefillin on your left hand, your left upper arm. You use the right hand to wrap the tefillin, correct? So the right hand, because it's used for such a special mitzvah, commandment, you don't use that hand for something which is as earthy, even though you have to clean yourself. But if you have an alternative, you could use the left hand, you don't use the right hand. Because the right hand, its designation is for this special mitzvah. That's the concept. We discussed many times, whenever you do a mitzvah, you're supposed to do a mitzvah with your right hand. You put money in the charity box, you do it with your right hand. We put out our tefillin, it's with our right hand. So to use that hand to clean yourself, it's not appropriate. Because you have no alternative, use your left hand. And we'll see in a second, it's not even the whole left hand. On the left hand, when you put on tefillin, the center finger, you wrap the straps around the finger. So when you use it, and this is what it's cited in Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Laws, when you use your left hand, it's every finger but that finger. Because that finger has the tefillin wrapped around it. And therefore, it's considered inappropriate. But somebody hears this, inappropriate. What are you talking about? You have to have a sensitivity. You have to have a sensitivity. Just one moment, please. Or you don't get. If you have the sensitivity, you can appreciate what we're talking about. If you don't have the sensitivity, the whole thing sounds like a bunch of nonsense. There's this famous story with Franz Josef, who was the Austrian-Hungarian emperor. He had a very special place in his heart for the Jewish community. He loved the Jews. And his circle of ministers, all of them were rabid anti-Semites. And whenever they could put a word in to distract or to criticize and condemn the Jews, they didn't miss an opportunity. And one day they come to badmouth the Jews. And they say, Tim, you know, these Jewish people, they're such small people. It's almost disgraceful to have these people as your subjects. And they said to Franz Josef, he says, do you realize in the Jewish code of laws, there are even laws that pertain that when one does his bodily functions, which hand he cleanses himself with? The right hand, the left hand, and how you have to expose yourself. Have you ever heard of such a people that they have laws which even pertain when you do such a bodily action, which is synonymous with the animal? Do you hear what they wasted time with? That was the criticism of the Jew to Franz Josef. See, he responds, says, you don't understand. It's just to the contrary. Because they have laws which pertain even to that private moment. And even there, when nobody's there, how you have to behave, that just tells me how special they are. That there's nothing in their lives that is not dictated by being refined and by godliness. So what they saw it as a criticism, he saw it as these are quality people. Many years, you know, on Lower East Side, used to have delicatessen stores, which was called the deli. And religious people would go there. It was 100% kosher. And they would ask you, do you want pastrami on rye? Do you want pastrami on club? Right? Larry remembers those questions they would ask you. And You say, I haven't eaten club bread, I don't know how many years, since I'm a young boy. And they say club, and they bring them out a big sandwich by the not they call it the heroes. You know, I know which hero sandwiches. The thing's about 4 feet long. And the guy takes the sandwich. It's not he cuts a piece off the sandwich. He holds it like Norman has his chauffeur, which is about 4 feet long. They hold his club sandwich and they start eating it. You tell me, is that appropriate behavior? Everything is so gluttonous about it. It's lacking in refinement. It's not the way you eat. You cut off a piece and eat a small piece. You want another piece, cut off another small piece. It's the same idea. The book written many years ago, it was called Go My Son. It's published. It's worthwhile reading. Phenomenal book. It was published by Feldheim publishers, Jewish book publishers. Larry, it's worthwhile to read. The person who wrote the book, his name was Shapiro. This person, Shapiro, he lived in Baltimore. He came from a very wealthy family in Europe. There was a town in Europe, in Poland, called Tikhtin. Right? Larry here, Tikhtin, T-I-T, Tikhtin, T-I-N, T-I-K, T-I-N, Tikhtin. It was a city in Poland. And his parents were like, had a wholesale, what's it called? They sold tools, wholesale tools. They sold pipes, nuts, bolts, all kinds of tools. Hardware store, wholesale hardware they had. And they're wealthy. And his first father was a great Talmud Chacham, studied in the best yeshivas in Europe. And he, as a young boy, I'm told, young teenager, 60, 70, he went and studied in all the best yeshivas in Europe. And what happens? The war breaks out. And the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, they carpet bombed Poland. And right after they marched right in, they broke the defenses of Poland, not that it was very much, and they took over the country. So when it happened, here they live in this beautiful mansion, and his father was a great Talmud Chacham, and he was a leader in this community as a Jew. And the bombs fall, and he had a 10-year-old brother. When the bomb fell, shrapnel went into his forehead, and he held his brother, and his brother just expired in his arms and died from this bombing. And they saw, if this is where the Germans are taking over Poland, there's no future. So the mother says to this boy, Shapiro, go, my son. Those were the words. Go, my son. Just go, leave, go from here. And that's when he left home. And this person, Shapiro, was such a gifted person. There's nothing he couldn't do. He enlisted in the Russian army. He was in the Polish army. He lived on a commune in Russia. I'll bring at a certain point, but I'm telling you the story. It's a phenomenal book. When he was in the Polish army, he was able to fix tanks and tractors. I mean, there was nothing within moments. He picked it up immediately. And because of that, pretty much he was able to survive the war because people valued him because he was a jack of all trades, literally. So he's living on the commune, and he picks up languages very quickly. He speaks Russian and Polish and this and that. He goes to the commune, and they work in the field all day. They come back. How do you think they eat in the commune? They have one big pot. Everybody has his wooden spoon, and everybody eats from the same pot. Understand? He wasn't used to that. Whether the food was kosher or not, that's not the issue. Everybody's eating from the same pot. Means the saliva on the spoon Everybody's saliva is in the pot, and they're all eating, no problem. But he never ate in that way. Never. Initially, he was like nauseated by it. Everybody else is, and you have to eat quick because if you tarry, you don't eat quick enough. There's not going to be much left in the pot. That's the way they were. How do you eat? You have a serving plate. Could you imagine you put a serving plate on the table and one of the guests take the whole serving plate and he thinks it's his plate and he starts eating out of that plate? It's not appropriate. You want to take first, second, third portions, fine. But you don't take the serving plate and that becomes your plate. But all that is based on modesty. It's refinement. A person who's a tzaddik, a chosid, where you live a life of not earthiness, you understand there's modesty. You become a quality person. We're not talking about etiquette. We're not talking about etiquette. It's just understanding that you don't want to behave like an animal. An animal puts his head in the feed bag, puts his head in the trough, it just eats. A human being is just not an animal. You put your head in the trough. You take a modicum of food and you eat it like a human being. A human being is not an animal. Many years ago, or Sameach put out a movie on the Olympics. The Olympics, the pole vaulter, the 100-yard dash, the various competitions. So what was the point of the movie? It was a film. What was the point? They had the pole vaulter, this guy running with this pole, and he pole vaults over this bar. And that's achievement. And they a moment later, they have a picture of a kangaroo, this awkward animal, and with ease, in the second, it's over the 16-foot bar. Then they have the 100-yard dash. This guy going, wins the gold medal. Then they have a picture of a cheetah taken off from 0 to 120 miles an hour within seconds. So what are you trying to prove? You're in competition with what? With nature. You want to be a cheetah. You want to be a kangaroo. Then they have a picture, a person, if you ever see pictures of South America, they dive off mountains, these divers, and they do about 15 somersaults before they hit the water. They have a picture of these awkward penguins walking awkwardly. They get to the edge of the cliff. They fall off. They turn over 29 times, and they go in the water without any effort. You want to be a penguin. What's the message? You're supposed to be a human being. When you're not in competition with what? You want to imitate and mimic the cheetah, the penguin, the kangaroo. What are you trying to accomplish? Why don't you be who you're supposed to be? Of course, you should exercise. But to go and compete in that arena of life, that's not what life's all about. A human being is supposed to compete as a human being. Intellect, refinement, quality of person, not this. People have it all mixed up. Any comments?